All righty. Good Wednesday evening, late afternoon. It's December 13th, 2023, and it's Wednesday. So we are talking about freeze drying again. Out here in the tiny house, on the live, you can see behind me, did some mud and work today, second coat on the tape. So this wall, I got to finish. Whoops, that corner there, and then tomorrow we should be topping the final, the final smooth out on it. So hopefully, going to be priming and texturing soon. So Wednesdays are always freeze dryer days. Spent a lot of time today working on packaging and labeling and still trying to find a new space for us to operate the commercial freeze drying operation out of. So we've got our packaging figured out pretty well. Just now need to do some design work and such. But that's what we have going on with freeze drying. Today's topic is kind of the why and the when, and who should have a freeze dryer and who should not have a freeze dryer. So we've covered this a little bit in previous podcasts, I believe. And so, you know, who should have a freeze dryer? Well, not everybody should have a freeze dryer. One, they take up quite a bit of space, not a ton of space. You're talking about, a large size is going to be about the size of a dishwasher. And then you're going to have the vacuum pump to go with it. Typically, you need a stand for it. So, you're talking 2 feet deep and 3 to 4 feet of width of real estate. If you're in a super tight apartment or something like that, a freeze dryer is probably not for you. Not forever, but just for right now. They also make a substantial amount of noise. Now, it's not something that you can't tolerate, but I see a lot of people in the Facebook groups, in the YouTube stuff, talking about, I just got a new freeze dryer, or it's on the way and I want to put it on my kitchen countertop. And, we're going to have it there, or we're going to put it in the living room for now. And temporary is temporary, and that's all well and good. We always say we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but where are you going to spend the time? I mean, depending on what you're doing, if you're just doing short candy runs, especially in the beginning to try to make some income and pay that machine off, you're only going to be running between 3 and 6, 7 hours for most of your candies. And so, you can totally do that and have that run during the day while you're at work. But if you're going to do meats, eggs, liquids, proteins, a lot of the, vegetables that have water content, they're going to be well over 24 hours. And that pump is going to kick on and off, as well as the freezing cycle. And so if you are in a more of a confined space and don't have room for that to be comfortable, it might be more inconvenient than it's worth. Now, somebody else that shouldn't buy a freeze dryer, or may not be needing to buy one right now, is somebody whose budget doesn't encompass not only the purchase of a $2,500 to $5,000 piece of equipment, not including, depending on the size you go with, the extra outlet that, the dedicated breaker that needs to be installed with the large and the extra large. That's going to be a few $100s depending on how far away it is from your panel. The cart to put it on, the oil, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people don't think about the extra power usage that the freeze dryer consumes. Now, there's a lot of people online that say, "Oh, my power bill jumped $50 a month." Well, I guess if you're in California or somewhere, the East Coast has fairly high power rates as well. You can experience that, but I mean, that's a pretty dedicated, like, I've got two or three sets of trays. The thing is defrosting. I might be using the pads to help it defrost. And then, we're reloading that machine and getting, on long liquidy type stuff, 36 to 40 hour, we're going to push for 14 to 15 batches a month. on some shorter stuff, a batch a day to keep that thing really running. The most I've ever noticed our power bill fluctuate with it is about 24-ish dollars a month. Our power bill's pretty stable around here, whether we use the freeze dryer or not. So it's not that big of a thing. But we have pretty cheap power here in Montana. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind and consider. Do you have the extra 50-ish dollars a month that you could spend on your freeze dryer? Because the last thing you want to do is do the research, do the investment, get the thing there, use it for a month or two, realize that you either can't afford the power or just you're not seeing enough benefit out of it. So now you have this big piece of equipment that you're going to sell really cheap, or it's going to sit there and you're not going to gain anything out of it. So you really got to think ahead of time about all the things, space, power, and then the other thing is the food cost. Depending on the size, and I always say that, it depends is the most common answer when you ask somebody a question, if they're being honest. And some people start with a small. Mediums are very popular. Now that the extra large has come out, the largest seem to be a little bit more popular. But even a large is like feeding an extra couple people a month if you're buying food. Definitely with the prep work, it definitely is. But if you're going to buy food at the store, not something that you're raising, not something that you're bartering for, but you're just using your food budget to go buy these things, it's going to be a few hundred to several $100s a month to feed the thing, because you're feeding yourself in the future, you're feeding other people in the future, but that food consumption is pretty big. We do a load of bananas. If we do a full load of bananas, we buy our bananas at Costco. They were $1.59 for the non-organic. They're $1.99 per bunch. And we're putting in the large, we're putting on average, 7 bunches. So one batch is $14. That runs in a day. Now you're putting that away for later. So you are going to hopefully end up eating the food. I'm not super big in, us a 20-year food storage. We're putting stuff away that we either can buy on sale or buy for convenience in the future. And so we use that freeze dryer for both. So you are feeding, you're feeding extra people every month, whether you're buying the food or growing the food. So, monthly expenditures can go up on average if you're doing real food. If you're doing candy, that's a totally different thing. But if you're doing real food, you can see a $250 to $400 a month increase in just expenditures on top of the freeze dryer, because you're putting that away and then you're buying Mylar and everything. So you've got to really calculate, where you're at. It's a great thing. It's a fun tool. I love my freeze dryer. I would have a fit if I had to get rid of it, and I would try to figure out how to get a new one as quick as possible. But there's a lot of expenditures and a lot of things that go into it. So the other thing is the packaging. When you run a batch of food, you're going to package it a couple different ways. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. You're either going to use the mason jars, which are anywhere between, if you have to buy them, I predicate everything on buying everything, because a lot of people that are just getting into this aren't going to have 1,000 canning jars. They're not going to have a whole bunch of Mylar bags. They're probably going to have a food saver, the junky one that you can buy at Walmart or Costco. And that will work for temporary food storage, but definitely not long-term food storage. So, you've got the cost of the food, you've got the cost of the freeze dryer, you got the cost of the power, and then your time. If you are a busy soccer parent and you've got kids that are in all the sports and you're running rampant all the time, that freeze dryer is going to be a whole lot of extra work, because you've got to prep the food, you've got to run the machine, which is idle time, so it doesn't really count. But then you've got to be ready to package all the food and then organize what you're going to do with it. And so if you're going gangbusters from early in the morning till late at night, packing the kids around, doing all the things, probably not the best time for it. Now, they are, with that, the cost of everything, the freeze dryers are actually getting a little bit cheaper, kind of like TVs in the early 2000s. a 50-inch TV was massive. You're Now a 50-inch TV is fairly small, and that TV was $2,000. Now it's 120. Now, I doubt very highly freeze dryers are going to get that cheap. But if you know that you're in a season of doing sports or whatever, and you've got something coming around and it's a great time for you to invest in it, by all means, buy the thing. Just know that you're going to have a very large chunk of money tied up sitting there. And you're probably, if you're anything like me, you're going to feel guilty about it not running, because there again, it is a pretty big investment. And you've got to make quite a bit of money for a $5,000 investment to not be a pretty big thing for you. So that's kind of the people that I would say probably shouldn't buy a freeze dryer right now. Um, and then if you're just don't really feel like learning, if you don't feel like, if you're not somebody that likes to learn something new, and you haven't been around it a lot, there's a bit of a learning curve. It takes a little bit of journaling, a bit of keeping track, especially with your climate. We see a lot of people in the Facebook groups that are like, well, this takes this long for me to dry on this setting. Well, that's great. You're with me, you're in Montana, you're not in Louisiana with 100% humidity and it's 95 degrees. It takes longer to do things. The machine doesn't run as efficiently. So you've got to be willing to either deal with the slop or take some notes, really figure some stuff out, and move from there. So that's who kind of shouldn't, or who I would recommend not right now. Or as a friend of mine, Becky down in Florida. Hi, Becky. Hi, Neil. As my friend would say, not at this time. Um, that's a Catan reference for making trades. Anyway, I digress. Um, who should buy a freeze dryer, or who should contemplate it at least? Well, if you've got a young family, or you've got a family by any stretch, and you've got people in the house, and you're doing some or a lot of cooking from home, a freeze dryer is a great thing to not only preserve leftovers, but to be able to invest in better snacks, better food for your body that's not full of all the just junk. Um, and typically, snacks are going to be super carbohydrate laden. I'm on the carnivore journey right now and struggling quite a bit with it, but that's a very, very low carnivore journey, or very low carbohydrate diet. So, if you can use that freeze dryer, you can preserve snacks for later that are a lot more convenient, that wouldn't necessarily require refrigeration. Or in the case of the bananas, you can take a handful of bananas, and that's the equivalent to a whole banana, and not have to worry about that thing going bad on the shelf, or on the counter. So that's somebody that should seriously consider a freeze dryer. The next thing, and some of these are going to be very obvious. They might be all very obvious, but really nobody talks about this. If you garden, or if you are a part of a CSA, a community supported agriculture program, and you get a box, even if there's just a couple people in the house, oftentimes there's stuff in there that you're not going to get to. And a freeze dryer is a fantastic way of preserving freshness, without having to go through the boiling process of canning and all that kind of stuff, or freezing, as well as preserving the nutrient. Because with freeze drying, you're typically preserving somewhere in the neighborhood of that 95 to 97% of the nutrient content in the food. So if you have a garden, if you have a CSA box, looks like my internet's starting to lag a little bit. Let's see. Solstice Girl. We're gonna go on a oop, we are getting I've got some issues going on here. Um Come on. I love my freeze dryer, but it can be a little work to get food ready to put in and then put away. I like to cook, so that helps. And that's the perfect ideal person for the freeze drying, you know, is the person that has, or you've got to definitely have that time to do that. And that's why I threw that in the cons, because it is a lot of work. It's not only paying for the extra food, but it's like feeding extra people, but different meals than everybody else is eating typically. Um, So having the garden is a great plus. If you are a person that buys in bulk, you can do a lot of saving with the freeze dryer as well. Um, so large families, um, even a couple, even just a couple that are living small or tiny or travel quite a bit. Oh, my light's going dead. Um, it could be a great fit, especially doing the meals. And then I know I said earlier that, if you're super active soccer mom type setup, it could not be a great time for it. But if it's seasonal, what you can do is you can really save not only the health of your family, money when you're out and about, and then a lot of time by freeze drying meals and stuff like that in the off season. If you're a baseball family and you're busy from February until, I don't know, August or something like that, when all the big travel teams are done. But you've got time in the wintertime, you can preload a bunch of meals, a bunch of snacks, all sorts of things that will not only save you money but time. And all you got to do is add some, you can go to a baseball game, um, and have a thermos of hot water and reconstitute a meal that not only do you and your kids like. I got to shut that light off just a moment. All right, so it's going to be a little bit darker in here now, but it doesn't look too bad on the feed. Um, so you can save a lot of money and time and effort by doing that, and not go to the McDonald's, not go to, or spend the money to go to a sit down restaurant. You can kind of eat and run type deal and get that nutrient. So um, that's kind of who should. And then, I mean, really, if you want one, go buy one. That's kind of what it rolls down to. But I would really recommend that anybody that does any sort of canning, preserving, anything like that would seriously look into it. Now, kind of like your prerequisites, what should you do or have done before you get a freeze dryer? Well, I mean, the most basic thing of all is know how to use a knife and have some common sense and be able to watch a couple YouTube videos. But when you get into freeze drying, oftentimes it's like a baby step process where you go from, like, you've got you're starting to buy in bulk a little bit. And so you're packaging either in food saver bags or using the Mylar jar or the mason jars to kind of preserve some things with the vacuum. And then typically you're stepping up into like dehydrating on your own, maybe starting to can a little bit. So there's a little bit of a gradation process. And I think it's really helpful to kind of go through those processes, because it's going to help you, especially if you've never cooked for a lot of people before. It's going to help you get your mind around the prep work involved with it, because it's not the same as making a salad for a couple people, or, making a small thing of soup. You're processing quite a few vegetables, or, to make meals or whatever. And there's some time involved, and there's some technique that really saves some time that you kind of learn as you go. I personally think everybody that, as long as it fits their lifestyle, I personally think everybody should freeze dry. That wants to, and especially is in the homesteading and preparedness community. Freeze drying, yes. Canning, yes. Pressure canning, I really recommend learning how to do that. It's another great way to preserve things. And then, just a simple basic dehydrator for those baby steps. We use all of those things. This fall, we had apples coming out of our ears. I mean, um, the one of the older boys and I one Sunday went and got like over 500 pounds of apples, and we had apples in the dehydrator. We were making apple butter, so we were canning them. We were setting them up for freezing. We actually did not freeze dry any of them, just because I never got around to it. We were doing some candy and stuff, getting ready for some fall bazaars and stuff. And then we juiced them, and then you can either can or freeze your juice. And so you take a glut of one product and you preserve it in several ways. And, including for apples, we made applesauce earlier in the year, so that's why we weren't doing that. But now you have not just apples one way, you have apples 7 ways. And I think that's a very strong thing for homesteaders and people in the preparedness and just in general life, to do is make one thing into many, because then you don't just get tired of the same thing over and over again. We've got a ton of freeze dried apple slices, and they're fantastic to munch on, but they're not very fulfilling because you can eat a whole quart jar and then you just get a bellyache. Whereas apple butter is nice on a piece of toast. Applesauce is nice to just have a bowl of, or if you're cooking pork product, to pair with that pork product. Um, and then the dried apple is not as fragile, and so it fits like in a small pack or somewhere where it's going to get mushed a little bit better. And so apples 5 ways always better than apples 1 way. um when it comes to preserving meals, we just start this year, we took on doing the pressure canning thing. And I know it's not freeze drying, but it's freeze drying related because we're talking about all of the processes. But we bought a Presto digital electric pressure canner. Looks like a big old instant pot. And I've been teaching myself how to pressure can, and there's certain things that are just better certain ways, and that's why I recommend apples 5 ways versus apples 1 way. You can freeze dry chicken and it turns out all right. It's not fantastic. It's not my favorite thing in the world. We talked last time about freeze drying. Bill was in here and he commented on how he didn't really like the freeze dried chicken, and the texture was off. And I made the recommendation to reconstitute in water, and being willing to learn those things and try different things is a big part of freeze drying, because not everything reconstitutes great. Everything will reconstitute, but will it reconstitute to what you want? And so you can do stew meat, you can do chicken, you can do all the things, and that's great. But I like to make a chicken soup or something like that and have a little bit larger chunk of chicken. Or, when we do stew meat, I like a big block of stew meat, like an inch by inch. And that doesn't, you can freeze dry that, but it doesn't freeze dry as well. And then it just doesn't kind of roll into, I like to do I was doing all the meat cooked. And then I started doing some raw, and I'm kind of debating back and forth because you have to have an element of planning with your freeze dried, just like all of your food that you're going to put up, about how am I going to use this? What's the use case for it? And really, what am I doing this for? Are you doing it for SHTF? The world, turns into an apocalypse, and we're living in the dark ages, or are you preparing, like Dave Ramsey says, like for the job loss, for the lean times? Are you just putting away for your garden to use in the wintertime, and maybe keep a little extra on the shelf? Instead of just doing a year's worth, maybe you do 2 or 3 years worth, so maybe you don't have to do that next time. Let's see. um Solstice Girl comments again, and whoops, still learning how to do this. I apologize. Ordered too many meals from a meal kit from the delivery service. Drying 3 of those meals right now. Also, some shelf stable milk that was about to go out of date. And that's a great thing about freeze drying, is you can take something that is canned and pushing that expiration date, open it up, put it on the trays, freeze dry it, and you've now put it in stasis again, to move forward. So that's a fantastic thing to do. And then also learning what you can mix and can't mix, because you definitely wouldn't want to do like garlic with the milk, because then you're going to inherently take on some garlic. So that's a great comment, great, fantastic. Um, so um, and I lost my train of thought. So I'm going to go on a sideline right now. One thing that I need to do, that I've been kind of putting off because I don't want to do it, is 3.5, 4 years ago. It was during the lockdown and the shortages and everything. There was a case sale at the grocery store, and we bought like 10 cases of pasta sauce, because we had been in about a 3 to 4 month pantry situation. We pretty well wiped that out by not going to the grocery store. So when the sale came on, we bought big because we weren't canning at that point in time. We were working on building up our catering business, and we had this other facility that we owned. So I've got all that still sitting there, and we've passed the expiration date by about a year. And while it's not my favorite sauce, it's not the worst sauce in the world. And tomato sauce will start eating the inside of the cans. Highly acidic things will start eating the inside of the tin cans a lot faster than than your vegetables and stuff like that. So I need to go through and open all of those and pour them onto the trays and freeze dry them and then put them away. And that will be like a longer term storage thing because I hate to waste it. And we could feed it to the pigs, no problem. But I would rather put that up for longer term storage because it's not horrible. Um, and if you are prepping and doing the doomsday thing, prepping for the end of the Civil War or whatever thing you want to prep for next, the big tornado, the big earthquake, that's going to knock everything out. You want to not only have things that you like that you find really good, but I'm all about having food storage for those that don't have food storage, especially those that would end up coming to our place if that should happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm not saying that this current state of the economy is not somewhat of a wreck. And with inflation and everything, you never know what's going to happen. So if something should go to shambles and then we end up with family members at our door or neighbors or whatever, I would like to have something where I could go, here, you can take this. This is good food. That'll get you by for a while, because we don't do this out of fear. We don't can out of fear. We don't do anything. We are preppers. I will come out and say that. But not the gun toting, like the world's gonna end tomorrow. But like, things will happen. Things do go wrong. We could get a 6-foot snowstorm here where we live. It's happened before. It was about 25 years ago. We could get that storm any day. And I know for a fact that my neighbors on both sides, who are young families, do not have deep pantry situations. And if it comes down to it, I want to be able to walk over to the fence line, or if there's that much snow, get around. We're going to be doing what we can to help them out anyway, and just say, here's some food, here's a blessing. Don't worry about what you're going to put in your mouth for the next week while we figure all this out. That's the perfect thing to do with that. So when you do have stuff getting ready to go bad, or expire, just because the can date says it expired today doesn't mean that it's not any good. A lot of that is for shelf rotation in the grocery stores and such. It's not going to last forever, but it's definitely going to last a bit longer than what that expiration or the best by date says. So that's a fantastic thing to do with the freeze dryer. And with some of the stuff that we do, volunteering in the community, stuff like that, we've had donated to us number 10 cans of stuff that you could resurface it down or whatever. But I mean, even our family of 6 isn't going to go through a number 10 can of baked beans, but we can open that can of baked beans, use what we're going to, freeze dry the rest. So that long-term, short-term storage, that's a big thing because we rotate through our pantry fairly regularly. So we are about at the 30-minute mark. Not seeing any other comments. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I've got choir or band concerts tonight for the older boys, and so we got to get out of here for that. That's why I started early. Friday's podcast is going to not be live stream, but I'm planning on doing it pre-recorded in StreamYard to drop to YouTube. We're going to be talking about a device called a Custom Care, and it is a microcurrent health device that I got from my naturopath / homeopath guy that I go to. It uses technology to help with things like asthma, to help with things like a liver or anything like that that's not working great. It's kind of along the same lines of a TENS unit. If you've been in physical therapy or anything, it's the device with the stickies that they shock you, it's kind of like a shock pulse that kind of causes the muscles to contract and do stuff. relies on frequencies. But anyway, I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive on that and talk about what, my experience has been with it, and the things I like about it, the things I don't like about it, because there's not a lot of info out there about it. And I would really like to get some information into the people who need it. Um, One thing that it did is that using that helped my mom to stave off a liver transplant for about 3.5, 4 extra years when they were saying she needed it now. And it helped her keep her numbers kind of level. So, anyway, with that, guys, this is AJ Harrison for Preparing for Prosperity. I want to just remind you guys again that we are doing our 100 subscriber giveaway from now until we get to the to the 100. I read another comment and I got distracted again. So we have about 20 subscribers right now. I'm doing a push to get to 100. We are working with Nicole Sauce of Holler Roast Coffee to do a coffee bundle plus a mug giveaway. When we do hit the 100 subscriber, we're going to do a random giveaway. So I'm paying for that out of my own money. I just want to, the more subscribers, the more likes, the more comments we get on our videos, the more info gets out there. Solstice Girl, there is not a lot of good info out there, especially on YouTube. I noticed the other day on TikTok, there's these stupid videos where people are making freeze-dried Skittles, in air quotes, by putting Skittles in the freezer and then throwing them in the dryer. And it's satire and it's meant to be funny and whatever. But there's people out there that are going to try that. And that just devastates me, because not only is it a waste of food, in air quotes, candy, but if you actually throw dry Skittles in the freeze dryer, it's going to wreck that thing and cost a bunch of money. So with that, guys, I'm out of here. Hit us up on the website, preparingforprosperity.com. Throw in the contact info. Get on our mailing list. I haven't started that yet. I'm going to start sending an email a week, probably after the first of the year. But you guys have a great day. And if you have anything you want me to talk about, any questions, leave a comment in the bottom of the video, and we can sure talk about them next week, because we do freeze dryer content every Wednesday. All right, guys, have a great day.